I would like to call to order the regular governing board meeting of the Jefferson Elementary School District for July 24th, 2019. May I please get members present?
Shaquille Ali.
Here.
Marie Brizuela is absent. Maybell Monio. Manufo Leah Inga Anuai is absent. Clayton Koo.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Joyner, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the governance team meeting guidelines. Governance team members will review the governance team meeting guidelines. Next is the approval of the agenda. I was asked to remove item 8E from the agenda for tonight because it's already been approved. 8E.
8.
Yeah.
8E.
Yeah, 8E.
From the consent agenda?
Just from the agenda because it's actually been put together.
This is from April.
8E.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like that. Yes.
Yeah.
I move that we approve the agenda with the noted removal of item 8E.
Second?
First and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item 6, 6A, board member acknowledgement and commendations. Comments?
No.
Okay. I don't have any except just to welcome Dr. Joyner to our school district.
Of course.
Yes. Next is item 6B, correspondence and superintendent comments.
Just something real brief. In your folders, you see a copy of the grand jury's annual report, and every year they usually have a report that involves schools in some way. This year was on immunization rates in San Mateo County. They did a study. There's some background in that report that explains different aspects of immunization and the ways that families can choose to abstain. We have a very high immunization rate in Jefferson Elementary School District. Almost all of our students who are able to be vaccinated are vaccinated. We still have a couple of students who are in the upper elementary grades who haven't transitioned to 7th grade who are still grandfathered into the old law that you can have personal belief exemption, but those are very few. When they get to 7th grade, they have to comply with the California law. So I will be reading over this and preparing a response. The board approves a response probably at the October meeting, and then we submit it to the grand jury. So.
Cool, thank you. Next is item 6C, persons wishing to address the board. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issue that is under the board's jurisdiction and not on the agenda. The maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Are there any speakers? No? Okay. Next item is item 7A, the consent agenda. The administration recommends approval of the starred items on the agenda. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as
Second.
listed.
First and a second, may I please get a roll call?
Mr. Ali.
Aye.
Ms. Monio. Mr. Koo.
Aye. Next item. Is it 9H? Yes. Oh, sorry. So next is at 9H, Thomas R. Policita School, Susan B. Anthony School Turf Replacement Project. The administration recommends approval of a proposal with Weston Miles Architects to provide manufacturer-contractor coordination for turf replacement, secure existing drawings, select and review material provided for installation, assist in coordination with the state CMAS contract, and work with contractor for completed scope for an amount not to exceed $6,500. In the event that extra work is needed, a summary of the hourly fees for service shall be used. Miscellaneous cost is cost plus 15% and mileage of 58 cents per mile. This will be funded by Fund 21.
So as you know, the Susan B. Anthony TRP artificial turf field is at the end of its lifespan. And we're ready now to replace it. And the next item is the actual contract for replacement, and I can speak to that now too. We're not going to be replacing it with the rubber pellets that are currently being used. We're going to be using a natural organic material. I believe it's going to be cork. That should be have less incident for toxicity, and there's lots of mixed reviews on the rubber fill that's used currently. So we will replace it with that. And well, this is just for the design. We need to get it designed and approved by the state, and then after that, it gets built by the contract.
And as far as longevity, how long is it expected to last?
This one here lasted close to 15 years, I think. And I think this, it expects to have the same lifespan. I mean, the lifespan of the current one is supposed to be 10 to 12. We've stretched it to 15. And if it hadn't been burned in one section, it probably would still be good. But we're happy to get rid of the rubber fill as well.
Is the cork less expensive or more expensive? Do you know at all?
I did ask Mr. Heath this, and he didn't think he thought it was negligible. It is more expensive because the supply is probably less. There's a lot more rubber tires that need to be recycled than there is wine corks. I'm hoping that's where they get that. I'm hoping that's where they get the cork because they do have to recycle them somehow. But
Okay. And then I guess this is a good time to bring up, just to ask about Ben Franklin. Are we going to do anything with that
yes,
track?
no, we will. We will be working on Ben Franklin. In fact, you should have an architect's proposal for the Ben Franklin field in one of the next few meetings. Ben Franklin presents a particular challenge because of where it's located.
Yeah.
And because we're going to make an improvement to it, we do have to figure out a way of making that space accessible to individuals that have mobility issues. Right now, there's just stairs, so we have to make it available for folks who use wheelchairs or walkers. Currently, we don't have students who use that, but any day we could have a teacher that needs to use a wheelchair due to an accident. So we do need to make that accessible. So it does require a little bit more creative thinking around how to achieve that, because it's a fairly steep slope. So.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Can you clarify the miscellaneous costs, the cost plus 15%? 15% of what?
So the way the architect and Ms. Kessler can clarify for me, they have their basic design costs, but if they need to buy something, like they have to go out of their way to buy something that they didn't anticipate as part of their original service, then we reimburse them plus the service fee for them to acquire that. So, I mean, it could be something as simple as we need 5 binders that we did not think, so we're going to go to Office Depot and buy the 5 binders. They submit the receipt plus the service charge.
Are we capping that miscellaneous cost?
I don't believe there's a cap, but these things are usually very little. They're, yeah.
They're
And
also
it is
pre-approved.
standard.
Yeah, and they're also pre-approved if it's large. Like, we probably don't need to pre-approve the purchase of extra binders, but if they're going to say, we need to buy a car so we can do this, then we have to approve that before.
Yeah, I know in the past that you've kept a close eye on anything that was large, and you've gone to bat for us many times. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I move that we approve the turf replacement at Thomas R. Policita and Susan B. Anthony School.
Second?
First and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Next item's item 9I, Thomas R. Policita, Susan B. Anthony School Soccer Field Turf Replacement Project. Administration recommends approval of the proposal from Field Turf with CMAS Contract 4-06-78-0031A to supply and install high-performance artificial infield grass surface at TRP and Susan B. Anthony School for an amount not to exceed $759,750.20. This will be funded partially by Fund 21 and the City of Daly City Park and Rec contributions from usage fees.
So this is following the last one.
This is only three of
And
us.
we-
You can make some motions too.
Expect to get about around $250,000 from the city of Daly City.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Thomas R. Policita and Susan B. Anthony Soccer Field Turf Replacement Project.
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Next item's item 9J, consider increasing the student paid meal prices for breakfast and lunch. The board will consider increasing the paid meal prices for breakfast and lunch based on analysis and recommendations provided by the administration.
So just a reminder, this is not for action tonight, it's just for information and discussion, and it will come back for action if it seemed appropriate at a future meeting.
So this information you received a while back, an info bulletin.
Yes.
And we haven't raised our food service prices, our meal prices for 10 years on the lunch prices, and the breakfast prices have always been the same price of the $1.50. You can see at the bottom there, when we did a survey, we are far below all the other districts except for one district. One has free breakfast and it has, actually charges more for lunch than we do. And one has a lunch that's lower for the elementary school, but not for the middle school. It is nice to be able to have low meal prices, and we do try to keep them as low as possible. However, over these, just since 2012-13 to 2017-18, so that 5-year period, our salaries and benefits alone have gone up $376,000, over 30%. And to this year, it will be $417,000. And a lot of that has to do with the PERS contribution going up. That has gone up 42% in the 5-year period, and after this year, it ends up being 65% increase in the PERS alone. And then, of course, the salary increases for the past 5 years, or for the 5 years from 2012 to 2017-18, have been just over 25%, as well as increased medical costs and such. So basically, what's happened is the cost of labor is a lot higher than it was before for these reasons. And we are also supposed to have, the feds require us to charge a minimum amount. And if we don't charge the minimum amount, which for the past couple of years we've missed the minimum, we have to contribute that from unrestricted funds. So in other words, they take what we should be charging according to, like, for the 1920 year, it's $3 a meal. And prior to that, it was, I think, like around $2.95, I think it was. And we were charging $2.75. So the number of meals that we sold, we have to pay 20 cents per meal last year. And in addition to that, we do give some free meals for the kids that are working and such, so that dilutes it even more. So we have to contribute that from the unrestricted fund. And increasing the meals, it is possible, of course, that some families decide not to purchase the meals, and that's something, we would have to risk. But if we don't, we have to contribute, and if we do, we probably have to contribute anyway, because the amount that we would make if we increased it by 25 cents is about $44,000, I said, per year. In here somewhere. And, the food service department, whereas in 12-13 made a profit, with all of these additional increases just in salary and benefits alone, have eaten up all the profits, and we're deficit spending there. And so we're going into the reserve that's in the food service fund. And so it's only a matter of time before we have to contribute to that food service fund anyway. In addition to that, there's declining enrollment, which is spread out to all schools. We only have one food service person at most school sites, so we can't get rid of that one. And so the staffing is very expensive to do it. So we're just basically recommending to go up to, I thought I turned that off, I'm so sorry. So we're just recommending to go up to what the federal guidelines are for now, and that we should look at it more often and increase it according to the guidelines. As I said, we can leave it low and contribute from the general fund. That's a decision that you'll need to make as to whether that's how you want the general funds to be spent. If I can answer any questions for you?
Yes, I had a question about, pardon me, when we got this information through the information bulletin, there was mention of an exemption that we could apply for, so I wanted to find out the feasibility of that.
Well, we can apply for the extension. It basically, exemption. It basically does the same thing that we're doing right now, in the sense that we will have to pay, we won't be required to pay it with the exemption from general funds, but we don't have enough in the food service fund to cover it for more than a year anyway. Because of the deficit spending, we would use up all our reserves in the food service fund that would pay for it. So we would be able to do that for 1 year, although we're recommending that we increase it in January, not at the beginning of the school year, so that the families have enough time to know about it. Can only hope as well that if the prices go up, that some families maybe will apply for the free and reduced that can apply. So the exemption doesn't bring us any money from the federal government or the state government, any additional money. It just doesn't make us have to pay it from unrestricted funds.
Does it make us have to pay from anywhere? Or we don't have to pay
No,
it at
just,
all?
we have to use it from, it'll just come out of the balance. Like, for instance, we have a reserve of $300,000 or something approximately, I'm just saying that. And if it would be $32,000, then, and we're not charging the students, then it would be used, if we get the exemption, those funds would be used. If we didn't get the exemption, then we'd have to contribute from the general fund, unrestricted. But the $300,000 will be gone anyway, because we're not able to have enough revenues, no matter what we do, because of our high cost of salaries and benefits, to cover the meals.
Could you explain the exemption to me?
I'm sorry?
Could you explain the exemption to me?
The exemption actually you just have to apply to this is just new this year, that exemption before we would not have qualified for. But it's just pretty much, for some reason, they've changed it where you just have to request it. And then they will supposedly approve it. You just have to give the district name, who's applying for it, and request it. And then supposedly, they will approve it for the following year, for the 1920 year. We have to do that before they say before the year begins, but I think that it's more before we start choosing to do that. And since well, it would be before the school year begins, so I would have to go and apply for that.
So the exemption isn't that we don't pay the difference, it's just that we pay from a different bucket.
Exactly. And the fund that we would pay from doesn't have that much money to be able to cover that plus the deficit spending from the food service department for more than a year, maybe a little bit more than a year as well. Anyway.
So I also had, excuse me, a question about, we had a previous coordinator. I think we still had the same vendor, but we had a coordinator before that came before us and said she was able to produce a profit at the end of the school year.
Right, and that was when we had when our salaries and benefits were much lower.
But that was the same vendor, right, but just a different coordinator?
Well, Aramark did, and so did Sodexo for a period of time, too. It's just that the meals being sold are going down in accordance with our reduced enrollment. And our free and our reduced meals are going down because we have fewer free and reduced students.
Okay.
So, of course, if they qualify for free or reduced, just because they don't qualify anymore doesn't mean the families can afford to pay for the meals, right? And then, that was my thought process here.
Can I stop you? Because basically what I was just asking is, we did have a coordinator before who, whatever way she did it, she came up with a way to produce a profit at the end of the school year. I remember.
Yes, and
It wasn't
if-
every coordinator that we have. I just remember one
Yeah, you're thinking of
particular.
Carrie.
Carrie, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, how can we find another Carrie?
Well, the problem isn't that. The problem is that if we didn't increase $376,000 in salaries and benefits, we would have made a couple $100,000 in profit.
Automatically off the food service program?
Yeah, because we wouldn't have the extra expense. There's no more people. It's just that the salaries have gone up 25% because of negotiations. The benefits have gone up, PERS alone, by 42% just for those 5 years. Those two items, the salaries and benefits going up, and these are for our people, these are for Jefferson employees, have gone up $376,000. Our loss was not $376,000. I would have to look at that particular year, but our loss was probably maybe 180 or something. We would have had a good profit. And we would have a profit this year, or the closing year as well, except that the cost of our salaries and benefits are up $417,000. So even if that $417,000, that cost of salaries and benefits was back when Carrie was here, we wouldn't have had a profit then either, because the salaries and benefits were less by
Okay.
coming close to $500,000.
So, I
That's
only have
part
one
of
more
living
question, then
there.
it'll be discussion with the board, but that just brings up another question, and we kind of, gave her applause and got excited about her basically saying that she found the way to produce more of a profit.
Actually,
And it wasn't just because our salaries were lower at the time.
No, we would be we would be losing more money if it hadn't been for something that she did.
Okay,
And
that's all I
that
wanted to-
is,
yeah, that's
so what that is we have what's called the supper program. Have you heard of the supper program?
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the after-school program, and we get federal funds for that. The federal funds we get for that more than pays for that program. That program, so what we were able to do is that the students, or the employees who were before just being paid from the breakfast and lunch program, now that supper program pays for part of their salaries as well. And because of that, she was able to turn that profit of, she did bring that in, and she was able to turn that profit then.
Right.
But even since that, we still have that increase in we still have that program. That program has grown a lot.
Okay,
We're
good.
making a profit in that program, but we can't use it. We can't use it for the other programs. There may
Okay.
be a way, they just softened some regs that are going to be for the 1920 year going forward, and there might be a way where we're able to, when we invest in like equipment, where that program can pay for more of the equipment, provided it actually uses the equipment, than its percentage of sales.
Okay.
So basically, what we're charging to that is the percent of sales that is compared to the breakfast and lunch program, which is approximately like 20% or so. We're able to charge these expenditures there, and that helps us a lot. And we sold, I guess, not sold, because we don't sell it, it doesn't cost anything to the students. I think it was like around $400,000 worth of revenues that were received from that. So if we didn't have that, we would be deeper in the hole. And that has helped us along so that we haven't had to raise prices for a long time. But it's, at one point, the increase in salaries and benefits gets too high to be supported by that. And that's where we're at.
So let me just clarify. So the child nutrition program expectation is that it is self-sustaining.
It's supposed to be,
That it's
yes.
supposed to be self-sustaining. The general fund should not contribute to it. It should generate funds both from supplying free and reduced meals or from meal purchases. And then secondarily to that, in those years that we were able to come in under cost, we built up the reserve in the program that has allowed us to go 10 years without having to raise
Right.
the prices. Hardly anything doesn't increase in 10 years. So we were able to keep the meal prices at the level that we had them because we had those reserves that could cover those deficits. And we bring this to you now because we see looking ahead and we see we will be running out of those reserves in a little bit more than a year. And so it's something that, just like with lots of other things, we try to be competitive, with our surrounding school districts. You notice we did not include any of our basic aid school districts here who charge well over $6 for their full price meals. And their PTAs pick up for the free and reduced kids that the federal government reimburses at a certain rate. They pay the difference. So,
Thank you.
I have a question. Do we know how Ravenswood Elementary is giving out free breakfast?
No, but they're probably just paying for it from the general fund. And if they have 85% free and reduced that are coming from direct certs, then they do. Then, and it has to actually come from direct certs, then they are allowed to serve everybody, but they do actually have to pay back the general fund, from the general fund for the students that are not free and reduced. So they, if we were able to do that, we would be able to do breakfasts and lunches to everybody. But any student that didn't actually qualify for free and reduced, we'd have to contribute that from the general fund. We just wouldn't have to like check them and start recording and asking for the reimbursement and, like proving it.
Is that what you meant, Mr. Vidales, by that we can't use the general fund to pay for it? Or, because I was going to actually ask that question, like, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, the design of the program is that it should not be
Oh, should
supported.
not.
It should not be. I
Okay.
mean, as you know, and maybe in this case in Ravenswood, it is supported by the general fund, but maybe they also have private funds
Right.
that pay for that, and a lot of school districts do, and the Zuckerberg-Chan initiative is very generous
Yeah.
to the Ravenswood School District, and they could probably use those funds to pay for that.
Gotcha.
Also, just to remind you, the amount that we get from the federal government is the same amount that Louisiana gets, Alabama gets, Mississippi gets.
Yeah.
And there, it's more likely to cover their labor costs, because labor costs are much lower than they are here. And of course, even in California, we have higher labor costs here than we would have in the Central Valley or up in the north. So
So would you say this is a state or a federal issue or both?
I would say both.
Okay, so this, to me, is kind of a red flag, to be honest with you, because it sounds like we are saying that because of teacher salaries, we can't feed our students.
No,
I mean,
it's
that's
not,
what it sounds like.
teachers, it's not teacher salaries, it's the food service employees.
service.
The folks who prepare the meals.
But if we go into the general fund, that, affects everybody.
Yeah,
so-
no, and that's where the board needs to make a decision. Do you want to use your general fund for that purpose? And that's a decision that should be an active decision, not passive.
Right.
And
that-
also,
okay. So I'm asking a lot of
yeah.
questions
No,
because
no,
I
it's
actually
very
have
good.
a thought pattern
Yeah.
on this. You
and
probably
then I
see where
think
I'm going.
Ms. Kessler was using the word profit. I don't know if the word profit is the correct word. It's mostly, it's
Cost saving?
Yeah, it's not even a savings. It's just it generates more money than it needs, but it's not. But it stays in the program, and as we've learned, it's been used over the last 10 years.
It went into the program, it built up our reserves in the program, and then it started eating it away year after year as
Yeah.
the salaries and benefits increased.
But I'm just glad we're talking about this. It's live, it's, being recorded, because this is a state and a federal issue that we need help with, because I don't feel comfortable raising any of the prices unless we drop down to free breakfast. That would be my hope, is that we could somehow match Ravenswood and give free breakfast, and then maybe raise our lunch a little bit if we had to raise anything.
If we do that, then we will have to pay from the general fund
Yeah.
to cover the
Yeah, I
breakfast.
get it. I understand fully. But when the information came across, when we got the information, it was interesting comparing the districts and seeing what was going on. And that was actually something I did want to commend the district for, is having such a low breakfast and pretty low lunch too. But then it made me think that we should be talking about this and being creative and actually finding out what the priorities of the board are. Because I know we have, for sure, Ms. Manio, and she could speak for herself, but she came on the board kind of through her experience with the food in our district.
Sure.
And then we have Ms. Liana Anoa'i, who, works with giving food to the community. And I really care about this issue too. So I just want to know what the options are, what's feasible, and what we can and can't do. And then, keep discussing it with my colleagues.
Well, I would like to do some research to find out whether there are any kind of implications when the program is not self-sufficient outside of, like, on an ongoing basis. Because when it drops down, and there's not the reserve to cover it, and it has to come from the general fund, if that were to happen on an ongoing basis, kind of basically planned in then I believe that the general fund can continue to support it, but that's not the intent of the program. But I don't think there would be any ramifications, but I would have to find out for sure,
Okay,
outside of the fact that the general fund would be supporting the food program.
okay, yep.
Additionally, because we have the whole thing about not shaming and not having the alternate meal,
Yep.
the bad debt that happens as a result has to be paid from the general fund. And this year, that's $35,000 that the general fund will have to pay for that. There are some families who've just simply decided to send their kids to the line and to get lunch every day and make no attempt to pay. And we have basically 90 days to collect, so if something is 4 months old, and we do try to, we can't, say anything to the students at all, and we can't send anybody any kind of credit or
But don't
anybody
they-
collection agency to collect or anything like that.
But don't the food, the cafeteria workers, don't they adjust each day according to how many people consume the food, like the day before? That's why they do a count, right? So
Well,
they
the
know
count, they
not to order
base
too
it
much
on the
next
count.
day.
So the teachers would get a count from their classroom,
Right.
and the count is called in, but the teachers can't say, Johnny, you don't have,
No, what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
okay.
if an extra person or two eats food, then the next day they would order a couple more, and then if the next day they didn't eat it, the next day after that, they would order less. So it kind of doesn't really affect it if an extra student eats the food, even though they're not part of the free
So
program.
I think it's an accounting thing. It's not how much
Yeah.
food you've prepared, it's how many meals have been served.
Right.
So if somebody takes a meal, then we have to pay a certain amount.
But that,
Right.
on the other end, sorry to go deep into
No,
this,
I
but
get
the
it,
worst
but-
part that we don't see also were students who have access to it, but they don't eat it.
Yep.
So,
That's true.
I'm just saying that really, for me, it's more just, are we feeding the students?
the
And I'm
students
not-
do have access to it
Yeah,
and
so that's kinda
choose
what
not
I'm
to
more-
have lunch
Yeah,
sometimes, a lot of times.
Yep.
Yeah, the
So
free
we don't
orange
really
juice.
know the true cost. So my thing is, I just want it to be available for the students.
Yeah, and we'd be interested in hearing the board discuss this because it is a board decision. And we've sort of laid out the financial picture and the board needs to make a decision and provide direction. We can come back with an opportunity for the board to vote on that.
I mean, it's good that you brought it to us now because you said it's over a year from now when the decision would have had to be made, right? So
Right.
it gives us enough time to really talk about it. And
There was a
do more
time,
research.
we're only allowed to have so much money in there. It's like 3 months' worth of revenues is what we're allowed to have. And there were times where we were really close to having too much.
Okay.
And then as the salaries and benefits went up, it started going down. And so that's not an issue anymore, unfortunately.
Okay.
But, yeah, it's where the board would like to put the funds.
Food service workers are under classified, right?
Mhm.
And their salaries just go up with all the other classified workers?
Yeah, they're part of the bargaining unit. Mhm.
I'm done.
Could we do more research as to finding out if something like the Zuckerberg Chat Initiative or anything like that could be available to us for this?
I can find out how Ravenswood is paying for that and see what sources of funds they utilize for their free breakfast. We could provide free breakfast. It wouldn't cost us very much because breakfast participation is very low.
Well, of
And
course,
our
it might go up if it's
If
free.
Yeah, breakfast participation is very low.
We do have to pay for it.
Because
Grades will go up, too.
mostly because kids just want to get to school like a couple minutes before the bell rings. They don't want to get there half an hour before
True.
to eat their breakfast. They'd rather sleep in. So I think so we may not, it may not cost us very much to do free breakfast just because our participation is so low.
Good.
And that may be what Ravenswood's counting on. They do have a high degree of homeless students in Ravenswood, and so they figure they can get a good meal at least once a day. Then that may tide them through, even if they don't purchase their lunch.
To me, I mean, it's part of, first of all, good nutrition. They say you should front load your calories, but also it's supposed to raise academic achievement, making sure students eat
Sure.
in the morning. So to me, it seems like something we could all figure out together, not just our district trying to figure it out,
Right.
but county-wide, statewide, something that we have free breakfast for students, and then figure out how to bring the cost down on the lunch.
Well, it is free for all of the free kids, which is a high percentage. I mean, and then the reduced students pay only 30 cents for it. So,
Yeah.
you
But
know,
then the lunch, sorry, the lunch, you even said that there's students who can't afford or who don't qualify for free lunch, but
That's
they
right.
can't afford the lunch. So we
Sure.
have to just look at, us as a board, we have to just provide the food. That's the way I look at it.
mhm.
And we'll have to figure out the other things, but I think we've heard a lot that we can take to people in higher, offices as well. They need to get creative with us.
I guess I have a question. So you recommend like sort of increasing by 25 cents. Are there any other alternative options to help alleviate the loss of the funds in the account?
You know, I can't think of any right now. I really just wish that our students, that any student that can qualify for free or reduced lunch would apply and get it. Sometimes we get them near the end of the year. We also have families who have been direct cert, but have said, I don't want to be on that, and they don't want to be in there, and so they don't.
Privacy,
Well, I mean,
just,
They
it's a
just-
privacy thing too.
they just don't want their kids to get the free or reduced lunches.
Or they don't want to fill out the
breakfast.
paperwork and, do the
Yeah, they don't have
bureaucratic
to
part
fill out,
of it.
they don't want to be listed on there,
Right.
yeah. So,
Well, they're not treated differently. They're in the
No,
same
they're
exact
not.
line, and there's
They're
no
not
one to
treated
say,
differently.
you have a free
I
lunch.
think that
They can't anymore.
there are people that are afraid that ICE will come after them.
Yeah, that's what I mean, it's a
That's
privacy.
really what it boils down to. And so they want to be taken off of it. Although I think that they, like, for instance, they're on the CalPads and they're on it. I mean, there's nothing we can really do about that. It's given to us. It's not even, we don't develop it. It's given to us from the county
Yeah.
or the state.
At what point do you want us to decide on this?
I'm sorry?
And when do you want us to decide?
If we want to if we decide to raise the price, if you decide you want to raise the prices, then we just need to be able to give them enough time. So basically, what I'm saying is if we don't raise the prices, I can apply for the exemption, and I could simply apply for it this summer anyway, and we don't necessarily have to use it. But it's not going to really do us any good because, our revenues aren't high enough for our expenditures, to cover our expenditures. And so that might get us over the hump of this coming year or not. I'd have to look at the numbers. But basically, if you do decide to change it, we just need enough time to message that out so that families have enough time. Until then, we'll have to just simply cover it. So it's just a recommendation because, it's been a long time since it's been increased. If you choose not to increase it, then we just simply will be covering it from other sources.
But also, we would have to raise it if we didn't file for the exemption, right? We would have to raise it to
No,
3?
we would have to pay from the general fund if we don't file for
Okay, to
this.
make up, to
Yeah.
charge $3.
And I think
Okay.
either way, it's probably, that's kind of what's going to happen, except for maybe 1 year,
Okay.
maybe.
Is there a requirement to raise the breakfast?
No.
Okay, good. And I heard Mr. Vidales say that it won't cost much to provide free breakfast, so that's good.
Well, I don't think it will if we have the same participation rate that we have. What we'll do, we'll come up with some hard numbers on some of these questions that you had. If you have any additional questions that you'd like us to research and look into, we can do that. We'll plan to bring this back for more discussion at the next board meeting. If it gets to the point where we've used up the reserve in the Child Nutrition Fund, Ms. Kessler referenced around $400,000 of deficit spending. So that would be what the general fund would be putting into. That means that those funds don't go to programs, don't go to salaries, don't go to benefits. It goes to this program instead. And it's a choice and it is a priority. But it does need to be made. I would like the board to make that decision because I don't want you to come back to me in 2 years. Why have we spent $1 million on free lunches?
Yeah.
We could have used that somewhere else, you know? So I do need to have that be made by the board.
If I can also ask, so if we increased it by 25 cents for both meals, it would bring about $48,000, if I'm doing the math right. Is that just meant to sort of help cushion some of that deficit spending?
I'm sorry, the last part?
It says that.
It raised about 48,000.
Yeah, so that's just meant to sort of cushion some of that deficit
It
spending.
just defrays the cost a little,
Okay.
the overspending by a little bit of money.
Okay.
It reduces the deficit
rate.
spending.
Is it the idea that eventually you may have to use extra funds from other types of sources as we
Yeah.
sort of cover that? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you get me any additional questions, that would be great.
I just also have one speaker card, Paul Hagan.
Hi, good evening. Paul Hagan, representing American Federation of Teachers, Local 3267, excuse me. Hope you're all having a good summer. Normally, when you spend this much time on a single item, I start to cringe and squirm. But, you know, I'm glad you're spending time on this. This is an extremely important issue. As a longtime classroom teacher, I know that our students' nutrition, just having food in their stomachs when they come into the classrooms is essential to their learning, and I know that it's an ongoing problem. So I just wanted to throw in just a couple thoughts I had. And you know, one of the problems I fear that we're having with free and reduced lunch applications is related to the ICE activities that our federal government is pursuing against our immigrant families. I know that in a lot of communities, we've seen a downturn in these families applying for anything, just out of the paranoia that they're living with every day. I don't know that that's a major effect in our community, but I'm sure that it is an effect on some level. I also just wanted to throw in, talking about, you know, providing food for our students is, and especially this free breakfast program, gets me excited because I know that so many of my students at middle school are coming to school without a breakfast. What we found at our school, however, was that it's not just providing the food, but it's how you provide the food to the students. Students are very picky about how they eat, where they eat, who they eat with. We found at Benjamin Franklin a few years ago, by providing food in the morning, free breakfast food in the morning, but providing it to them in one of the teachers' classrooms. The number of students participating went up markedly. We had 7th and 8th grade kids coming in that we'd never seen before and hanging out in the classroom instead of being on the yard doing other things. So anyway, I just want to throw those thoughts in, but this is an important thing, and thank you for taking time to consider, to look at it. Thank you very much.
One last question. Would ICE have access to those forms?
They don't now, but as we know, all it takes is an executive order to change the law. And so ICE right now is not allowed to have any activity on a school ground,
Right.
in a church. There's certain sort of protected spaces that
Right.
they cannot have activity, but that's just because there hasn't been an order to do that.
But that doesn't keep families from
But
being afraid.
families are still afraid. And I think another factor that's dropped our free and reduced lunch rate is families are now being paid the minimum wage, and the minimum wage has also increased in the last several years. So a family that both parents work a job with the minimum wage no longer qualifies, makes more than $36,000 in a year for a family of four. So if anything that needs to be done is that poverty index needs to be indexed by region, right? A person can be poor in one state or in one region, or I can say can be rich in one state or in one region, and in another region, like the Bay Area, can be very poor. And so a family of four are making $48,000 would not qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we all know with rent
Can't
being
live on that.
$1,500, $2,000, if you have a good spot, that's half of your money for rent. So I think that is something that we could start talking to our federal legislators about, indexing the poverty rate, and right now there's rules and regulations about even making that number even lower. So, with the SNAP program, lowering the poverty rate to below what it is now. So a lot of folks will not qualify if those things come to pass. So that's something. And I don't know what the appetite is. There certainly isn't that appetite in California. I've spoken to our state legislators and said, you need to index our state funding according to the region where we live. A dollar in Alpine County can buy a lot more than a dollar in San Mateo County. And so maybe San Mateo County should get $1.50 for every dollar Alpine County gets. Same with federal, a dollar in Mississippi, rural Mississippi, buys a lot more than a dollar in San Mateo County.
Could we come up, I don't want to make empty promises, but could we come up with a flyer that goes out with that form in Spanish, stating what you just said, that this, schools are basically sanctuary places where ICE cannot go, to try to increase enrollment of those students into the free and reduced lunch?
We can certainly do some education around that and let them know what the law and the practice is now. I do not want to make a promise that it will not happen.
Right.
But I can say
What's current.
What's current.
Yes.
We can do that through. If it's too late right now, probably to get it into the first day packet, but we can get it into a subsequent distribution.
Any other questions or items for this? Okay, so I guess we'll come back at a future meeting to further discuss this topic. Next item is item 12A, Board Policies, Administrative Regulations, March 2019 CSBA Board Policy Revisions, first reading. The board will review and revise Board Policy Administrative Regulations from March 2019 CSBA Board Policy Revisions as stated in the first reading. Any comments? Updates? If not, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
It's just the first reading, right?
Yeah. I'll make the motion since I'm actually part of the Board Policies Committee as well. I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the March 2019 CSBA Board Policy Revisions. First and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next is item 13, Governance Team Member Comments, Reports, and Board Meeting Reflections. Do it first. Do you have anything?
Just enjoy the rest of the summer.
I'll second that as well, too. Next is item 14, persons wishing to address the board on closed session items. Are there any speakers on this item? Seeing none, I will convene to closed session, but before I do so, I would ask for a moment of silence and endure in memory of 3 individuals. First is James Plumley. He was a retired warehouse supervisor for the district. Second is Carol Bowser, retired teacher at Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. And last is Elijah Jerry Pumpsey Green, father of Dr. Heidi Joyner, the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. May I please ask for a moment of silence? Thank you. We will now convene to closed session after a 5-minute recess. Thank you.